Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm creating 2 cards using the You Give Me Butterflies bundle from Gina K Designs. I'm going to do one card where I use the stencil and another card where I'm going to color in the butterfly with my alcohol markers. Here's a look at the bundle. You have this large stamp set. There is also the coordinating stencil and coordinating die, which I love because it has coordinating dies for the sentiments too. And then we have the 2-piece stencil where you can either use the one layer to add color to your butterfly and another layer to color in your flowers. So you can use the stencil and your inks, or you can use your alcohol markers. For the first card I'm going to create, I am going to be using the stencil to do the butterfly. I started out by taking the coordinating die of the butterfly and die cutting it out of white cardstock. I'm going to save the positive and negative piece of that die cut piece. Now I have my Misti, which has got some grid paper in here, and I just placed my stamp on there, picked it up with the door of the Misti, and then I'm going to ink it up with a black ink and stamp it down on that grid paper in my Misti. I'm going to use this as a guide. Then I'm going to bring in some sticky mats from My Sweet Petunia, and I'm placing that over my stamped image. What that's going to do is hold my cardstock down and also my die cut piece, but I can still see through it to line these up over that stamped image. So that sticky mat, it's just a really nice light tack to hold down that cardstock, and then I can bring in my die cut butterfly and place that over the top. You can either stamp this first and then die cut it. I just sometimes like to do this because I feel like I get better placement when it comes to lining up the die with the image. Then I can just kind of bend that mat. I use my tweezers to help get that started, and I can peel my stamped image up. I had die cut out a couple butterfly pieces, so I can just take my mat, place that back over in my Misti tool, line up the next die cut piece, and then I can stamp another one. So I like to have a few of them on hand in case I mess up along the way or I don't like how something turned out. Then to do the ink blending, I'm going to first start with just like a sticky mat or kind of a silicone mat, and I'm placing that sticky grid mat over the top. So that gray piece is kind of holding my grid mat in place so it's not going to slide all over my glass work surface. I put my die cut and stamped butterfly on there so it is stuck to that sticky mat, and then I placed the layer of the stencil that's got the pieces for the butterfly. So there are 3 different pieces for coloring up your butterfly, and that sticky mat is going to hold my stencil in place while I ink blend. I am using a small blending brush, and I believe this was light lilac, and I started in the middle, kind of blended out towards the edges, but I left a lot of that open so I can bring in another color, and this is going to be medium orchid. Now this one, I'm coming in from the outside and working in towards the center. I wanted to have this 2-tone look, and I will use these same colors throughout all the layers of the butterfly, which we have 3 here. Then I can just carefully peel up my stencil, and that is the first layer of my butterfly. I can then bring in the next area. Once again, I'm just placing that over those white areas. My sticky mat is holding my stencil down, and I can bring in that same light lilac color to the centers, and then bring in that medium orchid to the outside edges. So we are going to have kind of this nice transition from that bright, vibrant color on the outside edge to kind of that softer color towards the center. Now there are a ton of different color combinations you could do with this. You could even leave some of those areas white if you want. Now that I finished that second layer of the stencil, I'm going to move it up to the third. Once again, that sticky mat is holding everything in place, and come back in with those same colors where I have it light in the inside and then darker on the edges. Once I have this layer complete, I'm just going to take my sticky mat, kind of bend it in half or fold it in half a little bit, and then I can kind of help pry my butterfly off, and just be gentle. You don't want to catch the antennas, so it just pops right off, and I have that beautifully colored butterfly. Then for the second butterfly that I had stamped out, I'm going to use my Copic markers to color this in. I really wanted to have kind of these flicks of color to show more of that light to dark variation. So I started out with a light color in the very, very center. Then I moved over to the outside edges of the main piece of the butterfly. And I started with the dark color here, making sure to really kind of accentuate those flicks. I'm going to come in with a medium color, so that is B24. I will have all those Copic colors listed at the top of the screen as well. So after my medium color, I'm going to finish blending it out with the very lightest color, which I believe was a B21. And then I did come back in with that B26 and add just a couple more flicks to really have that darkest area kind of stand out a bit more. I did get out of the line a little bit, so I'm going to bring in a colorless blender, and that's going to help just kind of push that color back in. So here's a look at both of the butterflies. I decided to kind of make my wings stand out a little bit more on the one I used the ink blending with, and I just grabbed a really nice kind of vibrant magenta and added that to the very edges. I just grabbed something that I thought would match my color very well, and just adding small flicks on the very outside. I'm not doing any other blending, but what I will do is bring in a white Faber-Castell colored pencil and just add a little bit to the center of those parts. That's going to help give it more of a highlight area. So I did it both on the one that I'm ink blending, and I'm also going to add that to the one I did the Copic coloring to. So that's always just a nice trick if you feel like you lost a highlight area, is to bring in a white colored pencil and just very lightly go over that. Now both butterflies will be done. I'm going to set the blue one off on the side because I have a plan for that one. And I'm going to create a card using the one that's got the purple and pinks in it. So for this, I'm taking a white piece of cardstock and the Divine Daisy, which is a really nice large image. I'm placing that down in that bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to stamp it in Whisper ink. I wanted it to be more of a subtle look. Whisper ink, I will admit, I stamped this probably about 6 times because it is a super light ink, which is what I wanted, but it almost ended up being too light. So if I were to redo this, I would probably do it in maybe a shade darker. I experimented with it off camera and did black, and that was just too much black. It kind of got in the way of my sentiment. So I do recommend a light ink. Now I used Master Layouts 4 and Master Layouts 5. One of them creates the scallop that I die cut from white cardstock. The other one cuts out this rectangle that I used to trim out the panel with the stamped daisy, and that's going to fit perfectly inside of that scalloped, and it also adds a nice stitched edge. So I will be adding it to a craft piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But for my sentiment, I stamped out "You're an awesome friend," and I'm layering that together so that it's going to create dimensions. So I had die cut that sentiment multiple times to create those layers. Now I'm taking some tape runner. I'm going to add my stamped panel over the top of that scalloped panel. Tape runner is nice because I can kind of pick that up and move that if I need to make sure it is lined up correctly. And then I'm going to layer the back of that with some foam tape to pop this up from my panel. I'm adding the Connect glue that I have in a fine tip bottle to the back of my sentiment and placing that down in that bottom left-hand corner. So my butterfly is going to be kind of kitty corner from that. I added the Gina K Designs foam squares to the back of that, and I thought I was done, but decided I wanted to make that butterfly pop just a little bit more. So I'm going to actually come back in with a white jelly roll pen, and I'm going to add little highlights and little dots to the inside of the butterfly. Now, in thinking back to that stamped daisy in the background, which I love that idea, but thinking back, I probably would have used maybe Sandy Beach. I bet would have shown up a lot better. So you can kind of see it in the picture, but it is very, very faint. For my next card, we are going to create a moonlit scene for this. So I am bringing out a circle die from the Lots of Dots die set, and I'm going to die cut that from some Masking Magic. Now, when I did this, you want to make sure you don't have that line in there. You want it to be a full circle. So I will run this through my die cut machine to create a mask for my card. Then I can peel that backing off, and I'm going to place this about center of my cardstock up towards the top, wherever you would like your moon to be. It could be hanging off the edge of your card too. So we are going to really work our arm muscle today with our ink blending. I'm starting off with sea glass ink and a blending brush. I'm starting from the center of my mask and I'm going to blend out and go around that whole mask area. So this is going to create kind of a halo of that light color around our moon. Now once I have that, I'm going to bring in Blue Lagoon, so it's going to be a few shades darker than the sea glass, and I will apply that all the way around my moon. I'm not going to go all the way in. I really want to try and keep that halo of color with the sea glass. So I'm just going to let the ink and the cardstock do all the work for me. The cardstock I'm using is the layering white from Gina K Designs, and with her ink and cardstock, once you let this sit and dry, it really smooths out. So if you're not happy with your transition, just kind of give it some time and let it do its thing. Once I have the Blue Lagoon down, I'm going to come in with dark lilac, which is an amazing color once layered over that Blue Lagoon. Now this one, once again, I'm going to come in from the side, work my way around, and try and not go in too far. Because like I said, I really want to keep that halo. That is what's going to really draw your eye in to that focal point. So now for a little bit more contrast and intensity, I'm going to skim over the edges within the navy. So a really dark blue, even a black would work really good here. Then to kind of help smooth out the transition a little bit more, I am going to come back in with that sea glass ink, kind of go over those areas, and that's really going to just kind of help smooth the transition out. Now, keep in mind, there is a lot of ink on this cardstock right now. I do highly recommend at this point giving your background time to dry, and you'll understand why in a moment. I'm placing this panel in my Misti. I'm going to remove that mask and we have this nice bright circle. You don't have to leave it that bright white if you don't want. I really liked it, but I'm going to bring in the stamp set Summer Silhouettes and I'm really going to build up my scene. So before I do that, I knew I had some stamps that were going to hang off of the edge. So I brought my sticky mat back in and I placed my card panel kind of in the center. Then I started placing my stamps on the bottom, on the edges, and my butterfly I'm using there as a guide. Problem number one is when I had these stamps laid out and I picked them up at the door of the Misti, it kind of ripped the cardstock a little bit because that cardstock is super saturated right now. So when I peel this back, you're going to see I have some kind of white areas there on my cardstock. I have cardstock on my stamp, which I just used my tidy towel to clean that off and it's perfectly fine. But I do recommend making sure your panel is nice and dry before you place anything on it. I'm inking up my images with a Versafine Clair black ink. So this is a pigment ink. It does stay wet for a little bit longer, so you want to be careful not to rub it so you don't smudge your ink. But I stamped that down onto the background, and I was a little nervous that I was still going to rip my paper, but once the ink was on there, it was perfectly fine. You just want to be careful when you have kind of bare stamps on there. So now on this Summer Silhouettes stamp set are these really little images there of butterflies and fairies, and I don't think I ever noticed them before, but they fit into this scene so good. So I took them and I'm just kind of placing them around my butterfly in my sky and carefully picked them up with the door of the Misti and then inking those up once again with that Versafine Clair black ink. So they really just kind of add a small detail and fill in my scene a little bit to have these kind of magical elements added to it. I brought in one more little piece of a branch to kind of have it tapering up towards the top of the card. Now to remove this, I am going to kind of fold my sticky mat in half and carefully peel it up. Once again, if your cardstock is super wet, be really, really careful doing this. So like I said, highly recommend making sure your cardstock is completely dry before doing anything. Now for my butterfly, I had die cut another one out from white cardstock, and I'm going to layer these together with that Connect glue. This is just going to add some stability to that because there is some ink on there, and the layering white is a thinner cardstock, so I just like to have that stability. Now I brought in my heat tool and I'm going to make sure this is really nice and dry before I do any other stamping. I have a sentiment off of the You Give Me Butterflies set that I'm going to stamp just directly onto the card front. As much as I love a coordinating die, I really was liking the black silhouette of everything. So I'm just stamping that sentiment down towards the top. I really wanted to add splatters to my scene, but I really could not find a good point to add splatters. So instead of doing any splattering, I'm taking a white Jelly Roll pen and I am adding in my stars myself, just kind of sporadically around my scene. Really like how that worked. I think it looks really great with my butterfly. This is coming together great. And then I just kept having these ideas. So I have like this metallic paint pen that I decided to add kind of that trail behind the butterfly. There's a stamp image for it, but I really liked this metallic pen. And then I went around the rest of my card with it. Now this is a chisel tip, so I had to kind of tilt it to get the point of the chisel and add those dots. I also have a silver one, and I went around the moon with the silver and then came in again with the gold. I was having way too much fun with these metallic paint pens and adding dots all over the front of my card. Now, I had to cut myself off, find a stopping point, or I could have just added dots all over this card front. I went ahead, added foam squares behind my butterfly and placed it at an angle there, so it's kind of flying in front of the moon, and then placed that down. So this, I don't even know if I can part with this card because I really love how this came out. This was better than what I was anticipating. So there is a fun way to use that butterfly and creating a scene with maybe some of your silhouette stamps that you already have in your collection. There are two ways to use your butterfly, whether it is with your alcohol markers or using the coordinating stencil. I will have all of the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. I hope you enjoyed today's card inspiration. Thank you so much for joining me, and I would really appreciate if you did enjoy the video to become a subscriber and hit that bell so you are notified when new videos are posted. Thanks again, and see you soon.